Hello there.
The screen is dark, save for the faint, rhythmic pulse of a cursor on a white screen. Outside, the world is muted by a steady, relentless drizzle, the kind of rain that doesn't splash so much as it dissolves the horizon into a soft, charcoal haze. You are sitting in the center of a room that, only yesterday, felt like a war room. There are post-it notes losing their stick on the walls, empty coffee mugs with dried rings at the bottom, and a stack of books you no longer need to open. For months, maybe years, this space was charged with a frantic, electric kind of kinetic energy. Every breath you took was a down payment on a dream. But now, the silence is heavy. It's not the peaceful silence of a Sunday morning. It's the ringing silence of an empty cathedral. You stare at the ceiling, tracing the familiar patterns in the plaster, and you feel nothing. Or rather, you feel the weight of the nothing. You've crossed the finish line. The medal is on the table, the email has been sent, the degree is framed, or the mountain has been summited. By all accounts, this should be the moment the symphony swells. This should be the part where the color returns to the world in a vivid, technicolor wash. Instead, the air feels thin. You've spent so long defining yourself by the climb, by the not yet and the soon, that the now feels like a foreign country where you don't speak the language. It's a strange, quiet vertigo. You reach the summit only to find that the clouds block the view, and the only way left to go is back down. We spend our lives sprinting toward horizons, convinced that the arrival will heal the restlessness. But what do you do when the ghost you've been chasing finally lets you catch it, and you realize its hands are as cold as your own? What happens when the happily ever after is just a quiet Tuesday afternoon with nothing left to do? There's a term for this in psychology, the arrival fallacy. It's the grand illusion that once we reach a specific destination, we will finally be happy, as if happiness were a static coordinate on a map rather than a flickering, transient state of being. We treat our goals like a finish line in a race, but life isn't a track meet. It's more like a river. When you try to dam the water to create a perfect, still pool of success, the water eventually turns stagnant. Think of it like a high-speed train. For months, you've been hurtling forward at 100 miles an hour. Your entire internal chemistry is calibrated for that speed. Your adrenaline, your focus, the way you wake up in the morning, it's all geared toward the friction of the chase. Then, suddenly, you pull into the station. You hit the brakes. Of course you feel a jolt. Of course you feel nauseous. The momentum doesn't just vanish because the task is done. It turns inward. It becomes a restless vibration in your chest because you have all this purpose-driven energy with nowhere left to go. We've been conditioned to believe that the void is a sign of failure, or a sign that we chose the wrong goal. We start to panic, thinking, maybe I didn't actually want this? Maybe I'm broken? But you aren't broken. You're just experiencing the post-adrenaline blues. Philosophically, we often fall in love with the idea of the thing rather than the thing itself. The mountain peak is a tiny, cramped space of rock and ice. It's the thousands of steps leading up to it that actually filled your lungs. When we arrive, we lose our orientation because the North Star we were following has finally been reached. It's no longer in front of us, guiding us. It's under our feet, and it's just dirt and stone. If you're feeling this emptiness right now, I want you to know it's a standard part of the human machinery. It's the soul's way of exhaling. It's okay to sit in that gray space for a while. You don't have to find the next big thing by tomorrow morning. It's okay to be a person who did a thing, rather than a person who is constantly doing. I remember a specific Tuesday, about 3 years ago. I had just finished a project that had effectively consumed my identity for 18 months. I'd sacrificed sleep, skipped birthdays, and let my houseplants turn to brittle dust on the windowsill, all for this one specific milestone. I thought that when I hit send on that final deliverable, there would be a literal shift in the atmosphere. I expected the air to taste sweeter, or maybe for my heart to stop its constant, low-grade thrumming. The moment it happened, I was in my kitchen. The light was that thin, jaundiced yellow of late afternoon. I clicked the button. The success notification popped up in a cheerful green font. I waited. I stood there, leaning against the cold laminate of the counter, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. The house was so quiet I could hear the occasional tick of the radiator cooling down. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. People were walking their dogs. A neighbor was struggling with a heavy bag of groceries. A car drove by, splashing through a puddle. The world was utterly, offensively indifferent to my triumph. I had expected a climax, but I found myself in a vacuum. I went into the living room and sat on the floor. I didn't even turn on the lights. I just watched the shadows stretch across the carpet like ink spilling in slow motion. I felt a profound sense of grief, which felt ridiculous. Why was I mourning? I'd won. I'd done exactly what I set out to do. But I realized I was mourning the version of myself that had a clear direction. That me was gone, replaced by this stranger sitting in the dark with nothing to do. I reached for my phone to tell someone, but my thumb hovered over the screen. What would I even say? I'm finished, and now I feel like a hollow shell? It sounded ungrateful. So instead, I just sat there in the thickening dark. I felt the texture of the carpet fibers between my fingers. I smelled the faint, lingering scent of the takeout Thai food I'd eaten for 3 days straight. It was the first time in nearly 2 years that I wasn't on the way to somewhere else. I was just there. And there felt like a vast, featureless desert. It was terrifyingly quiet. I realized then that I had built a home inside the struggle, and now that the struggle was over, I was essentially homeless. I was a traveler who had finally reached the coast, only to realize I didn't know how to swim. It took me a long time to realize that the emptiness wasn't a hole I needed to fill. It was a clearing. When we spend so much of our lives planting trees, growing our careers, nurturing projects, chasing those high-altitude goals, the forest becomes dense. We lose sight of the sky because we are so focused on the canopy we are trying to build. When the work is finally done and you step back, that quiet emptiness is actually just open space. It's the first time in a long time that your mind has had enough room to breathe without bumping into a deadline or a must-do. I started to look at that hollow feeling differently. Instead of seeing it as a lack of purpose, I began to see it as a period of fallow. In farming, they let a field sit empty for a season so the soil can recover its nutrients. If they planted year-round, the earth would turn to dust. Human beings aren't any different. We aren't built for perpetual harvest. We need the grey days. We need the weeks where we are unproductive to let our internal soil turn over and become rich again. There is a strange kind of peace in admitting that you are currently in between. It's the grace of being a human being rather than a human doing. I learned to stop apologizing to myself for the lack of momentum. I started to appreciate the smaller, quieter victories that don't come with trophies, the way the light hits the floor at 10 a.m., the taste of a tea that isn't being drunk in a rush, the ability to read a book just because the cover looked interesting, not because it's useful for my next project. We often think the goal is the destination, but the destination is just a pause. The real life, the deep, resonant part, happens in the silence between the notes. You aren't behind or lost just because you aren't currently sprinting. You are simply existing in the space you worked so hard to earn. And maybe, just maybe, that space doesn't need to be filled with anything at all. Maybe being still is the highest form of achievement we can ever actually reach. So, if you're sitting there right now, surrounded by the remnants of your last big mountain, let the dust settle. Let the room be quiet. You don't need to rush toward the next horizon to prove you're still alive. You are here, and that is enough. The emptiness isn't a sign that you've lost your way. It's just the quiet after-echo of a heart that gave everything it had. Close your eyes and listen to the world continuing to spin without your permission. It's a relief, isn't it? To realize that you don't have to carry the weight of the next thing just yet. You've earned this stillness. You've earned the right to be a mystery to yourself for a little while. Tomorrow, or next month, or even next year, the spark will return. A new North Star will blink into existence, and you'll find yourself tightening your laces once more. But for now, let the rain fall. Let the tea get cold. Let yourself be the person who reached the goal and discovered that the most beautiful part of the journey wasn't the peak, but the quiet, holy moment of finally being able to sit down. The goal was never meant to be the ending. It was simply the door you had to walk through to find this peace. When the noise of the chase finally fades, who is the person left standing in the silence?
Thank you for listening, and see you in the next story.